Hello and welcome to my 13th week in media, and I know it's been a while because I've taken 2 weeks off because I've got so many new things to talk about, and I'm going to get all into that right after I do this little bit of an intro. So coming up this week, just to introduce you to this thing, we've got the brand new preview review. The film isn't out yet. You're getting a review of it already because I managed to see an exclusive preview screening of it today, and that is of Storks. I have also got catch-up reviews for Miss Peregrine's Home for the Peculiar Children, Deepwater Horizon, Swiss Army Man, The Magnificent Seven, and then TV Spotlight. We're not doing a trailer spotlight this week because of time issues, but TV Spotlight of Westworld and Scream Queens. My God, that's just a lot. It's a hell of a lot to cram into this, and it's just to catch up on everything that I've seen in the past couple of weeks. We're not going to do classic reviews. We're not going to do anything like that because we just haven't got time. I have seen a lot of classic reviews. I've seen Halloween. I've seen Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I've seen all these classic horror films, but I'm not going to be able to talk about them now. And that's where we come into the future. And you like my little... I had to separate it in some way or another. Before we get right into the reviews, I'm going to talk a little bit about the future. Not a lot, just a little tiny bit. And that is because a couple of weeks ago, the reason why there wasn't a podcast for the past 2 weeks is because I got myself a camera. I'm also in the process of getting lighting and microphones, and I'm essentially trying to remove new reviews from the podcast and make them video reviews. Not only that, I also have 2 other things planned. I have top 5 lists or top 10 lists or whatever sort of lists you want to say. I have those planned, and I also have like a alternate ending series. All of this will be explained more in a video that you will see as soon as everything's set up and ready. And over the past couple of weeks, I've been trying really hard to try and get videos. I've been trying a lot by the use of the word try, but I've been desperately figuring out how to get these videos the best they can be. And at the moment, I've produced 3 videos, and none of them I feel are up to par. So that's why I haven't been doing podcasts, because I've been working really hard on getting videos right. And I think now, as soon as I get the lighting and the microphone right, I've got the quality and the content perfect. And I'm really happy about that. And you will notice them very soon. Hopefully, by the end of the month, the first video will be up. And this will change completely. And this will become more of a chatty, classic review, less forcing new reviews out every week. Because sometimes I don't see enough new reviews to do a whole podcast. Which is the main reason why there wasn't one out 2 weeks ago. Because I'd literally only seen the girl with all the gifts. And I probably should have done one last week, but I was working really hard on a couple of videos. So that's why things haven't been completely straight out and perfect. Now, on the other hand, we're going to make them perfect again. Let's kick this straight off with my exclusive preview review of Storks.
In the beginning, storks delivered babies. It wasn't always easy. No matter how tough or impossible or brutal or inhumane or savage, we would triumph over adversity. Thank goodness we don't do that anymore. Now storks deliver packages for cornerstore.com.
Our new phones!
Always deliver.
Storks is the latest computer-animated, CGI, kids-animated comedy film. I must have said the word animation at least 3 or 4 times there in an introduction, which is a poor start to this comeback, but you'll flow with me. It's directed by Nicholas Stoller, who you may know from Bad Neighbours 2, Serenity Rising. He also directed the first Bad Neighbours. He didn't write that one, but he wrote, directed, and produced Bad Neighbours 2. He also wrote Zoolander 2 with a couple of other people, and is basically known for multiple adult comedy films. So having him now do a kids' film is a change of pace. And I went into this film not knowing it was directed by him or written by him or anything to do with him, and I came out realising it was directed and produced by him and written by him. And I understood it completely. The comedy in this film is slightly more adult than other films. Not in the way that it's just consistent sex jokes, which I was expecting it to be when it's a film about storks and the topic of the film. But no, the jokes were actually well-crafted, funny jokes. And I found myself laughing way more than I thought I probably should have been at a kids' film. Now, if you don't know the plot of Storks, it stars Andy Samberg, Katie Crown, Jennifer Aniston, Ty Burrell, and a couple of other people you may know, like Kay and Peele, and a few other people. And the idea is that Storks now run a business called cornerstore.com, which is basically Amazon, and they used to deliver babies to people, which is, as a child, I wasn't told it in specifically, but kids are always told that storks bring babies, not, they avoid the topic of sex. Whereas this kind of doesn't mention that at all and just assumes that storks were the main way of getting babies. Then there is a girl who was orphaned as a child, played by Katie Crown. She is an 18-year-old girl, and Andy Samberg's Stork is told to fire this girl. He doesn't fire her, and they end up on some misadventure trying to get a baby, the last baby, or a new baby, back to its home. The home is the home of Jennifer Aniston and Ty Burrell, and this kid desperately wants a little brother, and they have to bring this baby to the family. It's a misadventure, and it's hilarious, and I don't understand why it's so funny, but it really is. The comedy is just on point, and you feel for these characters, and I think it's because of Andy Samberg and the comic timing that he has. I absolutely love Andy Samberg. I think he's a comic genius. Everything I love, everything he does, I absolutely love, and this is no exception. His character is lovable, but he's just more down to being hilarious. I think the reason I associated and liked his character so much is because I genuinely did find him funny. There are moments in this film which are so unexpected that they become hilarious, and I wasn't expecting that to happen, but I'm really glad it did happen. And now, I have come out of this film really enjoying myself because I laughed a lot during this film, maybe too much during this film. The cast itself works really well, but where it falls is its story. It has an original comedy, and in times can be really funny with what it's doing. There is moments with a pigeon, which constantly just says the word bra all the time. It can be quite funny, and some of his situations are so ridiculous that he is really funny. The idea of Storks not being able to see glass, it's something you see in the trailer. It's a really funny running joke. There is lots of other things in this film which all bring together into making a funny joke, but it seems like they've focused too much on the comedy and not enough on the story, because there is no sense of adventure in this film. If you break it down, there's literally, they go, they crash, they go back. There isn't really much of a journey there, and the more you think about it, the less of a journey there is. There is problems with impact in this film. I mentioned a lot about impact in my last podcast and how I really appreciate when films do a lack of something. Well, in the end, there is a big fight, there is a big finale, and it's so anticlimactic because we haven't had anything really build up to it. We've had this constant quote-unquote danger and this excitement that's led up to it, but everything kind of fizzles out, and much like the final battle, it fizzles out. There are times when the comedy overweighs the story, and if you are watching this, you're not watching it to go and see the next Toy Story or Bug's Life or Inside Out. These Pixar, it doesn't have a touch on Pixar films in the story quality that they can tell. There was no moment in this film where I felt heartfelt or I felt like I was welling up. There was no moments like that. I didn't care enough for the story for me to attach to it to give it a high enough review, that ups it next to some animations. But as kids' animations go, I enjoyed this way more than I thought I would. Andy Samberg's fantastic. Jennifer Aniston's Ty Burrell felt like a real family. That's where the only heart can come from. The actual boy and all of that. It was cute, it was nice, it was funny. Again, Andy Samberg and Katie Crown as the girl and the stork. Funny, they worked together, they had good chemistry. No one felt out of place, but the story kind of felt out of place. And for that reason, I kind of didn't connect to it enough. If you just want something funny, it's well animated as well, let me just say that. It's well animated, and what they do with the world design, I really like. I think at times that it could have been improved. There could have been more exploration, and there could have been more of a journey. Overall, though, I really enjoyed Storks. I think if you are just looking for something to go and see with a sibling, which is what I did, I went to go and see this with my brother, I'd recommend it. It's not fantastic, it's not amazing, but it's a good time. I'm going to give Storks 3.5 stars out of 5.
Jake, right on time. Miss Peregrine, delighted to meet you.
He's invisible.
Of course.
We're what's known in common parlance as peculiar.
Claire, why aren't you eating?
She's embarrassed in front of Jake.
Don't be.
Because
is our abilities don't fit in the outside world. We live in places like this, where no one can find us.
Jake, come and play.
I knew you were one of us when you were born. It's time for you to learn what you can do.
But I'm just ordinary.
No, you're not. You were born to protect us.
Promise me one thing. Look after them, Jake.
I promise.
On to the second kids' film of this podcast, and it's a big one, and I mean a big, big one. We haven't seen Tim Burton in a while, and now he is back, bigger than ever, in Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. Now this stars Eva Green, Asa Butterfield, Chris O'Dowd, Rupert Everett, Ella Purnell, Judi Dench, Samuel L. Jackson. A hell of a lot of people, if you cannot gather. This has got a ridiculously good cast, a ridiculously large cast, and all round, a ridiculously brilliant cast. Very few negative things to say about this film, but when they are negative, they are unfortunately largely negative. This film is about Asa Butterfield. He is a boy who grew up best friends with his grandpa. Now, first things first, I may give this film a higher review because personally, I grew up very, very, very close to my granddad, and this, in a way, I kind of attached to it, and I am studying at the moment about emotional response and how if you've done certain things you may attach to a film more. I think maybe I am attaching to this film more because I can relate to the main character. Not solely relate to him, my granddad's not actually dead, but in the theme of it and what's happening, I emote with this character, and I personally think that may be why I enjoyed this film more than others seem to have. Anyway, Asa Butterfield, his granddad dies by some mysterious creature that he sees, and his granddad always used to tell him these stories about a care home that he used to live in, where all these mystical people lived, like Miss Peregrine, and all these other people that can float, people that can turn invisible, people that can turn into birds, all these mysterious things. And eventually, when his granddad dies, he doesn't get any closure, and he always wanted to know whether this home and everything here was real. And eventually he has to go on an adventure, and him and his dad, played by Chris O'Dowd, go on said adventure, and it's a fantastic adventure. I fell in love with everything about this film. I was expecting it to be very much set at the home, and all the trailers showed it solely to be set at the home, and I was very pleasantly surprised when the first 10-15 minutes are set in America and kind of building up his character, Asa Butterfield's character. As a character, I felt like I related to him because he felt real. We weren't jumping straight into ridiculousness. Yes, maybe the opening scene is a bit over the top, but everything about the beginning felt real, and I love the gloomy colours and everything they did with the beginning and how they made it seem like this was the dark, horrible world that it is. He then travels to Wales, where the care home is supposed to be. Again, dark and gloomy. Everything about the colour system is fantastic. I love the idea of Miss Peregrine in that world being bright and colourful and beautiful, and the real world being dark and gloomy and horrible, because that's what the film is trying to show. Now, as I said, Asa Butterfield is looking for this home and to figure out whether it's real. He finds out it is real. He finds out what's happened to his grandpa and all these other things, and eventually it becomes a race against time as he tries to protect the people in this home, all the people with mysterious powers, against these creatures which are coming to steal their eyeballs. Tim Burton, again, likes his eyeballs for some reason. I don't understand it. I'm not going to question it. I just enjoyed the idea of the quite dark theme. This isn't a kids' film for small kids. I saw this film again with my brother. He's 7 years old, and he enjoyed the film, and he wasn't scared by the film, but my brother's also watched a lot of things like that. I tried to introduce him to as many films as I can, and this isn't the darkest film he's seen. However, this film is pretty dark, and I imagine if your child or your sibling or whoever you're going with isn't accustomed to this sort of thing, they may be a bit creeped out, because it very rarely tries to stop you being creeped out, and it's a dark film with a very dark tone. If anything, this is a much more adult film than it seems, very much I would say like Edward Scissorhands is. The cast is superb. Asa Butterfield, for once, I don't want to punch him. Ella Purnell plays the floating character you've seen in the trailers. She is fantastic. You really feel for her, and you kind of always want this romantic relationship to happen between her and Asa Butterfield. There's a lot of tension and there's a lot of foreshadowing to it. You desperately want it to happen. I always think that's a good sign of a character. Eva Green, who's clearly playing Helena Bonham Carter's role, again, she actually is surprisingly good at this. I'm not the biggest Eva Green fan, and I am a huge Helena Bonham Carter fan. Maybe I would have liked to have seen her play that more, but I still enjoyed her role in it. All the peculiar children, in fact, felt well realised. Chris O'Dowd's fantastic. And then it becomes Samuel L. Jackson. Samuel L. Jackson plays the bad guy. He is the leader of these monsters that are trying to steal the eyeballs, and he's trying to hunt down Miss Peregrine. There's so much other lore behind it. I'm only touching the surface of it. It's all to do with the war and time loops and all these other things, but I think it's a lot more interesting if you go into this knowing very little. So I'm trying to be quite scarce with what I'm saying. Samuel L. Jackson, however, does play this leader, and he is looking for the Miss Peregrine's home because it's well hidden in the world, and all these other things. And he's supposed to be the big bad, and you're supposed to be scared of him, and his very first introduction is very well done. And then it goes completely downhill. In fact, he goes ridiculously downhill. His character never feels impressive. There is a moment when he and Miss Peregrine finally meet, and Miss Peregrine literally tells him to shut up, and he does. That she has complete control over him. And in that sense, I did not care. I wasn't scared of him. As soon as that happened, which is very early on in his character's story, I didn't care for his villainous anymore. He wasn't a villain anymore. He felt like just a normal person. He felt like a henchman, and there is no bigger force behind it. He is the main villain. And by that point, I knew he was going to be the downfall of this film, and that was such a shame, because I was so excited to see, and I'd heard really good things about Samuel L. Jackson in this role, but I was really disappointed with it. In fact, he is the main issue with this film altogether. The final act, which has by up to this point been a very dark, gloomy, impressively well-crafted film, is ruined by some unfortunately placed comedy elements. There is moments when they try and de-scarify, that's literally the worst word ever, but de-scarify the monsters and try and make them less scary to people, and it's just ridiculous, and it ruins the tone of the film, and I was really disappointed by the ending, because other than that, this could have been a very, very highly rated film, but Samuel L. Jackson and the villain idea that they had wasn't that exciting. The ending's fantastic, it's really emotional, it's really good. You care for all these characters, and by the end, you have fallen in love with these characters. It's a shame that the villains let this film down. I loved the music, I loved the style, I loved the cast, besides Samuel L. Jackson, and I was just disappointed by what Tim Burton did at the end. I think this is a return to form for Tim Burton, and I really do recommend this film. It's just a shame about the ending and the last act. I'm going to give Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children 4 stars out of 5.
My dad is Mike. He works on a drilling rig that pumps oil out from underneath the ocean.
And we're the explorers.
Like Dora.
Like Dora.
That oil is a monster. Like the mean old dinosaurs all that oil used to be. So for 300 million years, these old dinosaurs have been getting squeezed tighter and tighter.
We get it. Just use 2 tigers.
Then Dad and his friends make a hole in their roof.
Yeah.
And these mean old dinosaurs can't believe it. Freedom! So they rush to the new hole. Then smack. They run into this stuff called mud
Get in there.
that they cram down the straw. Hold the monsters down, we build them a new roof.
Yeah.
That was amazing.
You're getting so heavy.
Stay 10 forever, please.
You know, I'm recording this right now, and I'm on my 3rd review now, and I'm just buzzing to be back. It feels so right and so perfect to be back. So let's move straight on to our 3rd film. You've just heard a clip of the trailer. This is Deepwater Horizon. It's directed by Peter Berg and is the 2nd entry in what I am starting to call the Peter Berg natural disaster, natural event, real-life Mark Wahlberg trilogy. Now, I'm not sure that this is intentional, but Lone Survivor, also starring Mark Wahlberg, directed by Peter Berg, that's a real-life disaster, well, not disaster, but real-life action film starring Mark Wahlberg. This is the 2nd one, Deepwater Horizon, Natural Disaster, starring Mark Wahlberg, directed by Peter Berg. And the 3rd one, which is Patriots Day, which is coming out in a couple of months, also directed by Peter Berg, and also starring Mark Wahlberg. And again, a natural disaster, natural event, natural, real life, horrific. You're getting the picture of what I'm trying to say. It's the 2nd one of this entry, of this franchise. So, Deepwater Horizon is about Deepwater Horizon. Deepwater Horizon was an oil vessel that exploded and it's the biggest natural oil disaster, I'm liking the word natural, in US history. And I was expecting to hate this film because there is 3 things I hate in films the most. I hate disaster films, I hate Mark Wahlberg, and I don't like boats. Now, this is a bit of a random one, but I've never watched a boat film I like, and I've never watched a film with a good boat scene, besides probably Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, in which the boat scene's the best part of the film. Other than that, not my sort of cup of tea. And Jesus Christ, was this film good. My God, was this film good. I was blown away. In fact, I was incredibly hungover, but I was incredibly blown away. And I wish I'd seen this film in IMAX. In fact, I'm very tempted to go back and see this film in IMAX, because it's just so good and so brilliant. And if you follow me on Letterboxd, if you don't, you should do. Letterboxd is a film social media review site. My name is Dawson on it. I don't have a top. Well, I've ranked every film in 2016 so far, and this is number 8, which is pretty high for a Mark Wahlberg disaster film. I'll tell you that now. So if you don't know what it's about, then Deepwater Horizon is an oil vessel, and Mark Wahlberg is just a normal guy on this oil vessel. He works there. John Malkovich is the head of the BP guy, and Kurt Russell is basically the head of the entire oil station. They're your 3 main cast members. No one else you'd really know from this film. Kate Hudson's in it. He plays Mark Wahlberg's wife. She plays Mark Wahlberg's wife, sorry. And there is a lot of interaction between them two, but they're the main big hitters: Kurt Russell, John Malkovich, and Mark Wahlberg. And the BP guys are basically forcing Deepwater Horizon to do these tests in a place they're not sure they should be doing them in. And when they do these tests, and for some reason they pass up as positive, John Malkovich is like, yeah mate, you're going to do this now. And then they do it, and as you probably can gather from the film, it doesn't end well. The first hour of this film is all tension building. In fact, that's what surprised me the most. This first hour is so on the edge of your seat. Every single thing that happens builds and builds and builds, and the impact at the end, my favourite film review word at the moment is impact. It is so there, and so perfect, and words cannot describe how brilliant the impact and the tension building is. Whether it be from the coke bit in the middle, at the beginning, where Mark Wahlberg's daughter stabs a straw into coke to try and explain what he's doing for a science project, and what Mark Wahlberg's doing for a science project on the Deepwater Horizon. And it perfectly makes you understand what is happening on this oil rig, because this film won't dumb down for you. It uses all the terms it needs to use, and it tells you everything that happened, real life. And it works in that sense. You understand everything because it doesn't try to dumb it down for you, and you are trying to think as you watch it. And that coke can just explains everything perfectly. And it's right at the beginning, and it's brilliantly filmed, and it's a masterful scene in exposition and everything else that it is. It's brilliant, and it's a perfect example of why this film deserves every piece of praise it gets. Kurt Russell, fantastic. Mark Wahlberg, unbelievably good. John Malkovich, scary. It's very impressive how much I can dislike a character. I mean, I already don't like John Malkovich as it is, but this was impressive. He was just awful. An awful person. And when I don't want to say what happens, and it sounds like it's really obvious what happens, but it isn't. But his character develops in a way that he needed to develop. Everything that happens in it deserves to happen to every character. And although only 11 people died on this, its journey and its impact, when that final explosion and when everything starts to happen, you just feel like you are there. You are in this film, and you love every second of it. There are times in this film where I couldn't watch because it's so horrific, and it felt so visceral and real, and I was turning away, and I looked around at other people at times, and people were also turning away. This film didn't just impact me as much as it did me. That didn't make any sense. This film didn't just cause an impact on me. Everyone around me was also impacting in the same way, and I think that's testament to how good the filmmaking was. Whether it be the fantastic CGI, the brutality of the sound design, and everything just felt so, as I said before, visceral and real. I really connected with the characters and the event and everything, and it felt like I was there, and I didn't want to be anywhere close to that event. I really got a feel for this film, and I felt like I was in it. And I think for me, that's when I connect to a film the most. That's probably why I liked Buried so much, and why I went on a massive rant about how good that was. I have now seen this like over a week ago, and I'm still just as in love with this film as I was when I first saw it. This film blew me away. It went from making me interested, intrigued, to just angry, to horrified, to nearly crying at the end because it's heartbreaking. Everything about this film seemed to be terrible, and they executed it brilliantly. There was at times at the end, which I was expecting to be incredibly cheesy and lower this from a 5 to a 4.5, but no, they did it fantastically. I have not a single fault with this film. Not a single fault with this film. It is a perfect disaster masterpiece, and one that I will watch over and over again and love more and more each time. Talk about films that shock me. Deepwater Horizon got me exactly where it wanted to. I'm going to give Deepwater Horizon 5 stars out of 5. It's one of the best films this year, and I could not recommend it more. As I said, top 10 films of the year so far. Really go and check this one out, more so than probably anything else on this review podcast at all. Pilot Spotlight.
Can I just say for the record before we begin that yoga is just stretching for douchebags?
Noted.
Someone is targeting the patients at the Cure Institute.
And we have a mystery to solve.
Thanks, Obama.
You know who the killer is, don't you?
It's time for you to die. You mess with me and I will eat you for lunch.
Oh, hi there.
Why are you naked?
Just airing out my scrub, bro.
What's the matter with you?
Scream Queens, all new next Tuesday at 9/8 Central on Fox.
So, Scream Queens is the comedy horror film. Horror film? See, this is what I mean. I'm so used to film reviews that I sometimes just lose track of what I'm saying when I'm doing these TV reviews. So, Scream Queens is the comedy horror TV series based on classic horror films and everything horror. Now, the first season was set in a high school that was being haunted by a killer. This killer was known as the Red Devil, and it was basically a whodunit mystery of who this person is. And it was full of horror references, it was full of amazing horror cameos, it was full of great jokes, and a really, really solid mystery, which kept me very, very interested throughout. And I was always excited for the next episode. The cast is hilarious, the cast is brilliant, everything about this film... everything about this TV series just screamed, pun intended, out to me, and it's perfect. It's exactly what I wanted in a film. Again, it's just a waste of time me even speaking. I can't get anything right. It's everything I wanted in a TV series, and so much more. So when I found out it was coming back for a second season, and keeping the same cast, I was very, very interested. So this season, the cast, which is... It's hard for me to talk about the cast, because the whole point of it is anyone that survives from the first season comes back to the second season. So it's hard for me to talk about things that aren't spoiling season 1. So if you haven't seen season 1, I will try not to spoil, but I would recommend watching it before listening to this review, because it may give you a hint at things that are happening in the show. So the series stars Emma Roberts, Lea Michele, Jamie Lee Curtis, Glenn Powell, and all these other famous people that you probably know from other things. And this time, Dean Munch, played by Jamie Lee Curtis, is running a hospital, and not the school. Now, why she's running a hospital, it's so convoluted and so ridiculous that it's hilarious. And the idea is that in the 80s, there was a girl who was pregnant at a Halloween party, and all the staff members at the hospital were like, "No, we're not dealing with you." And then they murdered the person who she asked them to help. So this girl was like, "Can you help my husband?" They were like, "No, we're having a party, leave me alone." They were like, "Please help me, it's your job to help us." And they were like, "Fine, we'll help you." They took the body out there, and then they killed him and pretended they'd helped him, and he just died. Now, 36 years later, it is all kicking off again, because the green demon, the green devil, the green monster, whatever you want to call it, is going round the hospital trying to kill people. And that is brilliant. The monster's great, the jokes are great, and the story is just as interesting as the first season. But the comedy just doesn't feel as on point as the first season. There are times when I feel like it doesn't know what sort of comedy it wants to be. For example, there is a really, really cliche Mean Girls type joke with Emma Roberts, who plays this really stuck-up rich character. And then the next joke, or one of the earlier jokes in the programme, was a really niche Shining reference that no one would get unless they'd seen The Shining. And I thought it was hilarious. And I like that comedy. And it does that again in the second episode. There is a really, really niche Silence of the Lambs joke, which people won't get. In fact, there was loads of Silence of the Lambs references. The creator of this, Ryan Murphy, is just fantastic. He does American Horror Story, he did American Crime Story. He does all these shows. And he seems to have nailed his element of horror and references perfectly. And in this, it's even more evident. Anyone can watch this series and enjoy it. But people who enjoy horror and that as a whole will enjoy this so much more. You don't get a show which caters to people like this. And it may have this girly outlook on the outside, but on the inside, it's a very in-depth, good, funny, it's ridiculously funny at times, whodunit mystery with some brilliant horror references. I love Scream Queens for so many reasons, and as a huge, huge horror fan, I probably like it way more than the average person would. I'm going to give Scream Queens 4.5 stars out of 5, and that is for both the first and the second episode, even though I think the second episode's a bit better, but the first episode kind of had this better story than the second episode. I absolutely love this, and I can't wait for the rest of the series. Again, I wouldn't recommend it to everyone, but if you like horror and you like comedy and whodunit mysteries, it's the perfect combination for you, because I like all of those things. So I recommend that, hands down.
You came back.
You know, if I could stay right here with you, I would.
Just sometimes I feel like the world out there is calling me.
You're one of them, aren't you? You're not real.
Bring yourself back online.
Do you know where you are?
I'm in a dream.
You're in my dream. I designed every part of this place. It's not a theme park, but an entire world.
You and everyone you know were built to gratify the desires of the people who pay to visit your world.
Just don't forget, they're not real.
Westworld is the latest HBO series created by Jonathan Nolan. Now, Jonathan Nolan is the brother to Christopher Nolan and is the creator of Person of Interest, a show which I absolutely loved. I just loved every single thing about Person of Interest. It was fantastic. Westworld is the next show by him and is based off the 1973, I said in the intro 1973 film of the same name. And it's about a theme park that you go into and you do whatever you want with. There is robots that will work to you. There is scripted storylines, and you do whatever you want with them. If you want to have sex with the robots, you can. If you want to kill the robots, you can. You cannot harm other people in the world, so you cannot harm another person visiting Westworld, but you can do whatever you want to these robots. There is no limits in Westworld, and I just loved everything about this. This is my sort of show. I was loving the marketing and loving everything about this because it seemed really interesting. It stars a ridiculously good cast. We've got James Marsden, we've got Jeffrey Wright, we've got Anthony Hopkins, Ed Harris, and just so many other people. And so many other cast members as well, which I'd never heard of, who are just as brilliant. Evan Rachel Wood plays Dolores Abernathy. And she's a robot and basically the main character of the first pilot episode. Now, the story of it goes that these robots are having a bit of a malfunction at the moment, and there's a bug going round, and this is causing a bit of chaos. And there's a slight little malfunction event. But the main aim of the pilot episode is to introduce you to Westworld and what Westworld does, and how its potential to go wrong is there. And I think this is more of just an introduction episode than where the main story is going, although it has a running plot throughout it, which I think will be a huge, huge thing for the series. But as far as I'm aware, its main characters and what it's doing aren't getting introduced until the second and third episodes and so on and so forth. So this serves very much so as an introduction episode to this. And as that, it works fantastically. I was so fascinated by Westworld and what Westworld could do, because I think the idea of it's fascinating. The original film is a film that I've always wanted to watch, and I haven't watched it because I was kind of more interested to see what the show would do first. The music's fantastic. It's very, very well shot because it's a HBO show, but its budget is better than that of The Magnificent Seven. I enjoyed The Magnificent Seven more than I thought I was going to love it anyway, and I only gave that 2 stars. But Westworld is a western which I connected to on so many levels. It attached to everything I like in films, and it made it into a TV series. Whether that just be the fantastic cast and the very clever story that it's got going, I don't know. I don't know where this series can go for how many episodes as it's got. I don't actually know how many episodes there are in the series, but I am loving to see where it goes. HBO have got a pattern for making better and better TV shows. And whether we just learn more about Dolores, or whether we learn more about completely new characters, all I know is, after finishing this, I wanted more and more and more, and I wanted to learn as much as I could about Westworld. Part of me doesn't want this world to just collapse and go into chaos. I would be very, very happy if this first season was spent just kind of exploring Westworld and what Westworld can do with some more contained disasters, with a second and third season exploring a more post-apocalyptic destruction of Westworld. There is so much potential for this series to be fantastic. Whether it will compete with other shows like Atlanta or Black Mirror when that comes, I don't know. But I am very, very excited to see where Westworld can go, and I recommend this again to everyone. Westworld's pilot was so well made, and I don't think I've got across how much I loved it, but I did really, really like this. I'm going to give Westworld 5 stars out of 5. It's a pilot, it's not necessarily a big review, it's more of a PSA to go and watch this. It's a show that you've got to be interested in it though. If you are not interested by the concept of a world filled with robots, where you can do anything you want, like a game, like a real life GTA and such, then you might not be interested in this. But personally, from like a sci-fi dystopian level, I really relate to wanting to be in this world and be a part of Westworld. It's kind of like my dream thing to do. To be into a video game where you can have no limits and no issues with anything. But then its moral issues and its moral things are a big factor into why this park works and why it probably shouldn't exist. I'm talking and rambling a bit. You should definitely go and watch Westworld. It's a really, really good show. It's on Sky Atlantic or Sky Go, or if you're a bit cheeky, you can go and watch it online anywhere. And the same for Scream Queen Season 1 and Season 2. I hope you've enjoyed the 3rd, 4th, and God knows how many pilot spotlights there have been. I hope you've enjoyed this pilot spotlight.
I needed you to help me get home. Okay, buddy?
Okay, buddy.
You're a miracle. Or I'm just hallucinating from starvation. You're special. I'm special. There's 7 billion people on the planet. You might be lucky enough to bump into the one person you want to spend the rest of your life with.
Oh my God.
So this is the life I've forgotten.
This is just the beginning.
Swiss Army Man takes the position for the strangest film I've seen all year, and that is Stranger Than the Neon Demon, which is my favourite film of the year so far, and the reason I liked that so much is because it was just so messed up. And this film is messed up, but it's just weird. I can't comprehend how weird this film was. I was left kind of in awe after watching it, just because, not because it was that good, but because it was just that weird. And I think if you don't know anything about this film, you'll just not understand this at all. If you've seen a trailer or you've seen something for this, which I would recommend watching before listening to my review, just because it may give you a little bit of context to how insane this film is. So Swiss Army Man is directed by Daniel Schneit, or Schreit, or something, and Daniel Kwan. They're known as the Daniels together. And it stars Paul Dano and Daniel Radcliffe. It's a collection of Dans, really. And Paul Dano has been abandoned on an island. He's about to commit suicide, and then Daniel Radcliffe's dead body washes up on shore. And in the next 5 minutes, he is riding Daniel Radcliffe across the ocean like a jet ski. And that is only the beginning of how weird this film gets. From Daniel Radcliffe being used as a water fountain, Daniel Radcliffe's erection being used as a GPS signal, Daniel Radcliffe being used as a propellant for certain things. Daniel Radcliffe is the equivalent of a Swiss Army knife, and so much more. And I don't understand what happened in this film. And honestly, that's my biggest negative with this film. So, the plot in itself is there. I'm trying to be very scarce about it, much like I was with my first review. My Miss Peregrine review. And that's because I think this film is better experienced the less you know. But I feel like, even though I said you should watch the trailers, it's a very mismatched situation, because I was glad I didn't know that much, but I still wish I hadn't known as much as I did. But on the other hand, for me to explain this and show you how weird this film is, you probably need some sort of context. So, Paul Dano is basically just using him to try and get home, and the story goes in a place that I wasn't expecting it to, and I'm not going to explain, but it involves, they find a phone, they have a phone, and they're trying to get signal to try and find home, and that's the base of the plot as far as I'm going with it. But lots and lots of weird things happen, and as Daniel Radcliffe starts to become more and more alive, which in itself is just weird, the film kind of gets more and more interesting. But there was this first half an hour where I felt like it struggled to get going. When it did get going, it was a masterpiece in filmmaking, sound design, soundtrack. The soundtrack for this film, which is just a remix of Daniel Radcliffe and Paul Dano's voices, is beautiful. It's an absolutely beautiful soundtrack. This film is, again, absolutely beautiful. It's one of the best looking films I've seen all year, and there is a certain montage scene which is just insanely beautiful, and I don't think I have ever seen anything that has come to par with that scene filmmaking wise. It is godly, and I am very, very, very impressed by that scene. It probably would have put it up to a 5-star film. That scene alone is a 5-star scene, but if it wasn't for some confusion issues and a couple of other issues, it would be a 5-star film. So, the main issues with this film is it's a very funny film, but I'm not sure it knows when not to be funny. There are moments in which plot twists come, and I don't think they're coming at the right time. There is a big twist, big event, maybe not a twist, it's pretty obvious throughout the whole thing, that happens around 3/4 of the way through, and by the end they try to do something with this twist. Now, again, I'm talking very, very brief because I don't want to spoil it, but it felt like the big twist should have come at the end, and there is loads of moments like that where I feel like some things probably could have had more impact, and I really, really liked where some of the story went and how some of the story was made. The CGI in this film is fantastic, and its messages that it's trying to say is fantastic. It's just let down by this poor idea of what is supposed to be happening. Sometimes there are moments when I don't know what is happening on screen myself, and I think that's where it loses its focus. I don't always know what's happening, and I couldn't get a clear idea of what its message was supposed to be. Seeing these characters journey together, and grow together, and connect together, a man and a dead body, I was shocked by how emotionally connected I was. There were times which can possibly bring a tear, but there are times when you can be interested and shocked and just creeped out. I was laughing throughout the whole film because I think this film is hilarious in just a way where if you step back and think, what the hell am I watching? Everything's 10 times funnier. I really enjoyed the majority of this film, but I felt let down by the idea of not knowing what it was supposed to be telling me. I felt like it needed a bit more of a clear conclusion than it did at the end. I'm not saying that I needed a set-in-stone answer, I just think at times it didn't even know what its answer was itself, and that to me is an issue. It's a filmmaking masterpiece, it's an acting masterpiece, it's a soundtrack masterpiece, and its script for the most part is absolutely genius. But there is just times when it loses its track and it loses its focus. On Letterboxd I gave this film 4 stars, but on hindsight, I only have a couple of issues with this film. I'm going to up that review right now. I'm going to give Swiss Army Man 4.5 stars out of 5. Paul Dano and Daniel Radcliffe are just amazing, and I'm shocked by how good Daniel Radcliffe was in this film. It's something that's hard for me to review without spoiling it, and it's just something you need to see for yourself, because you'll never watch a film like this. I have never seen anything that's come close to how strange and weird and wonderful this film is. It is artsy, and it is different, but different can be a good thing, and I always like a good different film. 4.5 stars for Swiss Army Man.
Man carries a gun, he tends to use it.
Dan, you dead? Pity. I had just ordered a drink from that man.
Took a job looking for some men to join me.
Is it difficult?
Impossible.
How many you got so far?
You and me?
Who's she?
We work for her.
Good Lord.
That's right.
That man murdered my husband.
I want something. I take it.
He will take everything we have.
So you seek revenge?
I seek righteousness, but I'll take revenge.
And here comes the trash. The Magnificent Three, more commonly known as the Magnificent Seven. I feel like the Magnificent Three is a much better, more on-point name, because, actually no, the Magnificent Three is a bit much. I would actually say it's the mildly average three, not the Magnificent Seven. This is just awful. Really, I have very, very few positive things to say about this film. It stars Denzel Washington, Chris Pratt, Ethan Hawke, and 4 other people. Each of those 7 people have a distinctive trait. I can tell you now there was a Mexican. I can tell you now there was a Japanese guy with swords. I can tell you now there was a fat man. I can tell you now there was an Indian with a bow and arrow. That is the extensive character development of the other 4 characters in this film. Then there is Chris Pratt, who's a gambler, whose magician-like skills get him 3 uses in the film. There is Denzel Washington, who plays a black man who no one acknowledges is black, which is really racist if you don't take the context of the Wild West and the idea of racism in America at that time, which was incredibly, incredibly prominent, and Django did it best. This doesn't acknowledge it once, and that is a very big missed opportunity. And then there's Ethan Hawke, who plays the alcoholic. I'm not actually sure what his trait was, but he basically plays a war veteran alcoholic, and that's the most exciting thing I know about him. Now, personally, I love a bit of Chris Pratt, I love a bit of Ethan Hawke, and I don't mind a bit of Denzel Washington. So those 3 being the most developed characters wasn't the end of the world. I don't mind a good Western. The key there was, it has to be a good Western, and this is far, far from a good Western. So the base plot of the film is a villain comes round shooting them, that villain disappears and doesn't appear to the final battle of the film, and I'm not even, exaggerating there. There is not a single scene of him in there until the final battle, which means he loses all impact because you do not care about the villain at all. When the villain only appears at the start, does something evil, and then appears at the end, how are you supposed to feel like you're connected or you hate this villain when he only has one scene before the attack and destroy the villain? Spoiler alert, this film's terrible. Everyone knew what this story was going to be. There isn't really a big bad guy. It's a poor, poor film. Poor film. So anyway, this bad guy attacks. Then the woman whose husband was killed in this attack goes, "Nah, mate, I'm not having this." She hires Chris Pratt and Denzel Washington. They find 5 other people who don't really know a lot about anything else. They then become the Magnificent Seven. They spend half an hour training, and then there's an hour-long fight scene. An hour-long fight scene. My God, did it drag. My God, did it drag. If this is dragging, this is not a touch on how much that hour-long fight scene dragged. Jesus Christ, it was bad. There was no impact. Again, my favourite film review word, impact. Not a single piece of impact in this film, because you could tell it was a 12. This was made for mainstream audiences, And I'm pretty confident their idea of what a mainstream audience wants is just fighting, shooting, just shoot some more things, and maybe people may like it more, because that's all it was. It was shooting, and more shooting, and more shooting, and then they lost all impact because there was no impact when people got shot. And as I'm starting to gather from every review I'm doing, impact for me seems to be a big thing. And when I don't care, or I don't feel like anything's happening when someone's getting shot, and everything feels like a staged western, nothing feels real. There is no blood in this film. And that's probably a big reason as to why when someone gets shot, it doesn't affect you at all, because there's very little blood at all. Someone gets shot, there's a hole in the shirt, and then they fall to the floor. There is no sense of danger and destruction. And yes, some of the end is quite brave. I haven't seen the original. I went into this knowing only about this. I haven't seen any of other Anton Fuqua's films. Anton Fuqua, I don't know that I mentioned it, is the director of this film. It was written by Nick Pizzolatto, and that's pretty much it. You do learn a bit about Denzel Washington's character. You do learn a bit about Chris Pratt's character. I don't understand why he was the gambler. He uses his gambling things like 3 times. It was a waste of a character trait. And he really feels out of place with his comedy. That's another big thing. Chris Pratt's comedy doesn't fit well in this film. They got him because they knew he'd sell. This film needed to sell with its budget, and Chris Pratt's probably the only way they're going to sell this film. He isn't very well placed in this film. He doesn't fit in at all. Denzel Washington does fit in, he is really good in it, and Ethan Hawke's the best character in the film by far. I'm a big Ethan Hawke fan, maybe that's what influenced me a little bit. But Ethan Hawke's character even has so many flaws and so many issues with it that I just didn't care. As I said, the actual story is bad guy, walk, back to the town, fight, hour long, end of credits. Just poor story design. There is no sense of adventure, there is no sense of this team coming together because you know so little about the team. I didn't care when certain things happened to any of the characters that weren't Chris Pratt, Ethan Hawke, or Denzel Washington, because how am I supposed to care about characters who I don't see and know nothing about? It was a waste of characterisation for me just to see those 3 characters. I needed to learn things about all 7, not just who they are and what their trait is. It became dull, it became boring, it became uninspired, much like the rest of the film. No one wants to watch an hour-long fight scene in a town which doesn't have that many interesting set pieces in it. I wouldn't mind a 20-minute fight scene, but I'm not exaggerating when it was 50 minutes to an hour long. So much of that film was a fight scene, and I don't understand it at all. I liked the middle shootout. I thought that could have been good, and that was where it probably would have been a 3-star film. An hour-long fight scene just gets everything worse and worse and worse. And if it wasn't probably for the 3 main cast members being pretty good at what they are, and even though Chris Pratt didn't fit in very well, he was still pretty good in that role. And I did enjoy his character. Ethan Hawke made this film just that little bit more bearable, because everything else in this film is unbearable. The soundtrack is okay. It's shot so poorly. There is a scene when they open some barn doors and all 7 of them are supposed to be standing there in like a dramatic pose, yet one of them is cut off of that shot. One of them is cut out of the shot. It is 6.5 of them, and it's like the biggest guy as well. There is no way they didn't notice that. It's just poorly made. Everything about it is just poorly made. And as I said, I'm very much sticking by the average 3. This is by no means the Magnificent 7. This is utter trash. I'm going to give the Magnificent 7 2 stars, and that itself is a pretty high-scoring review. I would say watch the originals. I haven't even watched them, but they've got to be better than this trash. It was bad. Do not watch this film. The Magnificent 7 gets 2 stars out of 5. And that is another week of reviews. It is good to be back, and it's even better to say this hopefully is the last ever podcast like this. I'm so excited to move on, and I'm so excited to do all these other things. But next week, if this happens to be there again, either way, you're going to get reviews for The Girl on the Train and War on Everyone, and a couple of other new releases that are coming out there. But the biggest one there will be The Girl on the Train. I'm looking forward to it, even though it's got a lot of negative reviews from people. I'm still intrigued to see what I think about the film. I hope you enjoy everything that comes to this channel in the future. And if you did like this, please give it a like, please subscribe, and please tell me in the comments right below if you've seen any of these films and what you think of them. Or just follow me on Letterboxd and do the same there. I will contact anyone in any way, shape or form. I just like talking about films with people, really. I could talk about films with people for hours. In fact, I do talk about films with people for hours, so please don't be a stranger. If you want to follow me on Twitter, my name is Dawson Bear again. I try to keep a universal, I like to keep everything under one roof. So Dawson Bear on My Week in Media, on everything. If you want to check out my blog, Dawson Film Reviews, I don't use it very much anymore, but there is still some classic reviews. There's a lot of advertisement for me there. Like, comment, subscribe, follow me on Twitter, follow me on Letterboxd, Dawson Bear. I don't know if I've got anything else to say. Tune in next week, tune into this channel when new things come out. This has been my 13th week in media, getting a high number now. We're getting high numbers now. I hope you've enjoyed. My name is Dawson. This is me signing out.